Hello everyone, my name is Michael SK, and welcome back to Umineko When They Cry episode 4, where George is getting absolutely doo-dooed on in a fight against Gap, and I think Jessica is trying to somewhat fight back against Renove. See, the testing has started, and honestly the questions that they were, having to answer were pretty difficult, You really had to use the old noggin. Jessica's was a bit of a oh, here's the switcheroo or whatever, which I wasn't really impressed by, but George, man, George, he's won my heart. That man is cynical. He is crazy. However, that has become his downfall because he's also done a little bit of a switcheroo, and that has led to a fight where he is getting absolutely doo-dooed on. Still pinned in midair, George moaned. Then Gap, with George still hung up on her foot, grinned.
認めてあげるわ。君の態度だけは一人前よ。でも、力が伴わなきゃダメだわ。知ってる？この世を滑るには3つの力が必要だそうよ。
Yep, money.
一つは権力。
Okay, yeah, influence.
一つは財力。
There it is, money. Told you.
最後は何か知ってる？
Love.
本で読んだよ。暴力だろ。
Close enough.
正解。君にはそれが足りないわ。
Gap finally released George. She kicked upwards one more time, changing into another roundhouse kick and knocking him into a pillar.
権力を伴わない王者にも、財力を伴わない王者にも、金蔵はその3つを兼ね備えたわ。だからこそ、暴君として君臨した。君も金蔵の後継者を名乗るならば、その貫禄を見せてごらんなさい。ほら、いつまで寝ているの？立ちなさい。じゃないとまた落ちるわよ。
悪くない動きですよ。しかし、レディには少々ふさわしくないかと存じますよ。
Oh, she's not your typical lady, She's got some strength.
ひょろひょろと、ちょこまかと、反撃してこねえのかよ。なめてんのか、うぜえやつ。
Renove dodged skillfully, jumped back, and avoided Jessica's fist. But he still didn't strike back himself. Because of his dodge that was as rapid as a fluttering flag blown by strong winds, Jessica's fist wasn't even able to touch him. Amidst the sensation that her own blood was boiling, Jessica regained her offensive composure. Even though this room was large for a bedroom, it was a very cramped place to keep up such exaggerated dodges in for long. She calmly realized that and started using not just her fists, but her legs as well.
ほう、ボクシングは腕でやるだけのうちは半人前です。腕は熱く吠えたける獅子のように、そして足は冷たく獲物を狙って追い詰める蛇のように。
蛇に足はね
えぜ。確か
Yeah, she got you there. Jessica began cornering Renove towards the wall with perfect footwork. She didn't let him get around her. Renove's magnificent dodges looked flashy, but they needed a large footing. Once cornered, he wouldn't be able to dodge anymore. Jessica knew the characteristics of her weapon, the brass knuckle, very well. This powerful weapon's most notable characteristic was how it didn't give the opponent a chance to defend. Even if they blocked with their arm, that arm would receive direct damage. If it hit the wrong way, it might even break the bone. So she cornered him. With this fist, she'd whittle away at this demon who had lost any way to escape.
おっと、おや、いつの。
ようやく追い詰めたぜ。みんなを捕らえている場所はどこだ。クソジジイのいる場所はどこだ。洗いざらい喋ったら、そのヒゲをむしり取るだけで勘弁してやるぜ。
それは困ります。これでもセットに毎朝1時間をかけているのですから。
ギブスの世話になったら、それもできね
えな。おっと。
Oh, wow. I like this visual of him. Renove had blocked Jessica's fist with his arm. He tried to act as though it was no big deal, but it must have hurt a lot. Jessica grinned. Renove smiled the same way, but twitched slightly.
なるほど。これは確かに痛いですね。
最終勧告。泣いて詫びろ。
それはできませんね。キャラが崩れます。
なら、お前が崩れ落ちるといいぜ。鶴瓶打ちだ
Jessica's fists were buried into Renove, but there was a resistance that seemed too hard and the sound of breaking glass which startled Jessica. At a glance, it looked like Renove had caught Jessica's fist with his palm. That wasn't quite true. When Renove opened his hand, a faint purple, glowing barrier like a glass shield appeared, stopping the attack by a hair's breadth. We've seen this before. Not from Renove specifically, but we've seen others use this sort of trick. Pulling herself together, Jessica let her fist fly again, but with a truly magnificent gesture, Renove caught all of them.
悪魔ですので、この程度の魔法くらいは、それにしてもなかなかやりますね。人間だったら私はここで降参だったでしょう。悪魔だからまだ戦い続けることができる。
おかしな真似を。
それで終わりですか？攻撃を繰り出すばかりで、ご自身の防御がおろそかではありませんか？
Oh, it's got a little bit of a repel, doesn't it? Renove's palm shot to within a hair's breadth of Jessica's stomach. Jessica was knocked away by the purple shield, rolled backwards, and smashed her head on the bed.
人間ごときに私のシールドは破れませんよ。もう二度と私の体に触れることができると思わぬことです。
ならよ、そのシールドごとぶち抜いてやるぜ。
Yeah, he just said that you can't.
不屈な方だ。その根性。なるほど。次期当主として実にふさわしい。もう少しお相手させていただきましょうかね。これも試験官の役得です。
What a guy.
砕けろ
Gap looked down on George, sneering. George was on a path in the rose garden, lying face down in a puddle. The merciless rain beat down on him, so that it looked as though even the heavens were mocking him.
立ちなさい。また落ちるわよ。
George stood up shakily. It seemed that his spirit had not given in, but the damage done to his body was fairly significant.
命乞いなさい。君のしていることは何も選ばない4番目の選択肢に同じ。君が選んだのは3番目の選択肢でしょ。両手両膝をついて詫びれば私への比例を許してあげるわ。そしたら君を地下牢へ案内してあげる。そこで君は愛するシャノンと非力な自分のために他の人質たちを一人ずつ殺していくの。できるわよね。その覚悟はあると。
George didn't answer, but his gaze was still obstinately resisting surrender.
あまり強情が過ぎると今度こそ奈落の底の底まで。
Gap's strength was evident. That was probably clear, even more than it was to George himself, to Shannon's group watching through the three-sided mirror.
庄司様、もうやめて。私なんかのために。
姉さん、
私のことなんて好きにならなければ、ジョージ様は誰とも戦わなくていいんでしょ。なら、私なんて捨ててください。忘れてください。
There was no way that voice could have reached George, but even so, George answered.
嫌だね。僕は屈服しない。
へえ、どうして？
それが僕の覚悟だからだ。僕はシャノンのために全てと戦う。そして全てに認めさせ、全てに僕たちを祝福させる。
ねえ、聞かせて。どうしてあのシャノンとかいう家具のためにそこまで言えるの？あんなのただの出来損ないじゃない。給仕一つ満足にできないガラクタ家具だわ。
Oh, come on.
愛する女性への暴言を僕はそれ以上許さない。
だったら何？ひ弱な僕ちゃんが私にどう抗うというのかしら。
人を愛するとは強さだ。それを知ったから僕は強くなれた。シャノン、僕は君を愛している。
My man.
その言葉だけで僕は何度でも立ち上がれるんだ。
シャノンは力よ。私に愛を語られても。
いや、伝わった。それが愛だからだ。シャノンには今僕の言葉が聞こえているよ。そうだと信じられることこそが愛だ。
こいつ。
You know, he's not really on the right track, but yeah, she can hear him.
シャノン、君は家具なんかじゃない。家具だったとしても世界でただ一つの僕だけの家具だ。生涯僕と寄り添ってほしい。僕には君が永遠に必要だ。
ジョージ様。
焼けるわ。口説きならうちの人を超えたわね。
若さですな。
Damn. A straight up spectator said that one too.
愛が強さなら坊やはどうしてそんなにひ弱なの？その弱さがつまり君の愛の程度なわけね。婚約者への愛もひ弱。両親のあっけない死に様もひ弱。君の人生は何から何までひ弱だわ。
シャノンは僕に愛と強さを教えてくれた。もし君が僕の強さだけでシャノンへの愛を確かめようというのなら、僕の愛を教えよう。
言うわね。
I swear, I actually would lose my shit if George was able to come out with the wackiest power. Like, nobody expected it. Like, maybe he's coming out with a stand or something, or the power of love is actually, like, the power of the demon or whatever.
なるほど。
Or the power of a samurai.
何度も蹴り倒されて転がされ、それでも立ち上がるのがシャノンからもらった強さだと。ならあっけなく殺されたあんたのお父さんとお母さんからは何をもらったの？
At that time, there was a blackout. Even though they were outside?
違う。これは。
Oh shit, the thing blocking Gap's vision was the bottom of George's shoe.
側頭蹴り、尾骨骨折。
What the fuck? It had stopped right in front of the tip of Gap's nose.
母さんにもらったものはこの蹴りだ。
Several moments after, Gap jumped back. Of course, that was too late. If George hadn't stopped, he would probably have caused the damage he had announced.
そして父さんにもらったのが忍耐力。
Anger with a low boiling point isn't something to be truly feared. True anger is disciplined by fortitude.
君の暴力的意思表示は理解した。また婚約者と両親への名誉毀損も理解した。そしてそれを撤回する気がないんだね。
こいつ。
君の攻撃はもう十分に理解したから、そろそろいいかな。反撃しても。
ほざくな、坊やの分際で。
A pitch black hole opened its mouth at George's feet. But George rapidly opened his legs, straddling the hole. The same move won't work again. It was an extremely smooth dodge, and the upper part of his body didn't even quiver.
忍耐とは熱くならず冷静に相手の出方を研究することだ。何のために？決まってるじゃないか。わかるかい？
わかんないわよ。
反撃してきっちり借りを返し、二度とちょっかいを出したくないと思わせ、涙と鼻水で顔面をぐちゃぐちゃにして、それを拭うのを忘れて額を地面にこすりつけて、何度も謝りたくなるほどに完膚なきまでに完璧に叩きのめすためだよ。
Damn, he really do be going for those kicks, especially after he got kicked a bunch of times. George dashed. Pitfalls opened one after another, but George didn't step in them again. And because he was persistent, he was able to reach Gap a second time.
後ろ回し蹴り、顎部骨折。
It was stretched out more forcefully and beautifully than Gap's had been. Of course, while it centered directly on Gap's face, it stopped a hair's breadth away. Perhaps she couldn't rely on pitfalls at this close range. Gap kicked at George's shins as a diversion, and then in the instant of weakness when he tried to deal with that, she aimed a kick at his stomach. It was a bee-like stab by her stiletto heel, but it sliced through the air where George no longer was.
上段かかと落とし、鎖骨骨折。
By Gap's side, George calmly announced that, his foot still raised, if that monarch's heel had swung down, a collarbone fracture would probably have been the least of her worries.
こいつ資金じゃ私より強いの。距離を。
She jumped backwards to open a large gap between them. She jumped and leapt and even flipped in midair, increasing that distance. And it should have been magnificent, but for some reason it was very similar to the movements of a small scared animal. If she opened the distance between them, she'd be able to fight at the range that was her specialty, using a mixture of pitfalls and kicking techniques.
バカが私を倒せるチャンスを3度も逃した傲慢。奈落の底で後悔なさい。
When she magnificently landed and tried to aim a pitfall, a razor-sharp wind cut Gap's bangs. Yeah, it cut them. It happened twice. This time it didn't just stop a hair's breadth away, but scattered her bangs with its air pressure.
アルマーダ・コンマルテーロ第1撃で眼底骨折、第2撃で脳挫傷。
Damn, George knows his shit. Gap was too shocked to speak. George had closed in over all that distance in an instant, letting off a fearsomely nimble mid-air double kick. Furthermore, with the accuracy and edge of a razor, it had cut nothing more than several of her bangs.
空手で蹴りの威力を、テコンドーで速度、カポエイラでは自在の間合いを学んだ。
God damn.
母さんが色々と移り気でね。でも色々と特徴を学べて勉強になったよ。
なぜ当てない？私が女だからとでも言うのか？
君は王者の力として3つ目に暴力と言ったね。君はどうやらまだその暴力の意味を誤解しているようだ。この場合の暴力とはね、単なる敵対すれば無傷では済まないという抑止のことを指すんだよ。
抑止だと？
In short, this is what it meant. This was why all of George's attacks up until then had stopped a hair's breadth away. These bare misses, which were more difficult than hitting directly, had all been performed so splendidly. Also, if George had wished it, any one of those would probably have crushed Gap. He had daringly not done that.
君も言ったろ、暴力は滑る力だと。暴力で相手を破壊してしまったら滑られないじゃないか。王者の暴力とはね、 見せるだけなんだよ。破壊しない。屈服させて自らの財産とするんだからね。君に泡でも吹かれたらみんなの囚われてる場所に案内させられないよ。
Gap had to admit it. She had to admit that George understood force in its truest sense.
みんなのところへ案内してもらうよ。抵抗はおすすめしない。もう寸止めはしないよ。
ごめんねリア。あんたの兵隊借りさせて。
Oh.
私一人じゃ手に負えないわこいつ。
She's actually having to rely on the goats. As a large pitch black hole opened in the sky, 3 muscular goat attendants fell out. They surrounded George.
増援会？それは僕がひ弱であることを撤回したと受け止めていいのかな。
認めるわ。あんたの人間の力を侮ってたわ。
違うね。これが愛を覚えた男の強さなのさ。
ほざけ！臭いことをシャーシャーと。さあヤギたち、その男を潰して肉団子にしてやりなさい。このヤギたちはバカだけどパワーだけはあるみたいよ。あんたの死体婚約者にも見分けがつかなくしてあげるわ。
降伏拒否並びに継戦の意思了解したよ。以後は君の攻撃に等しい分だけ君に実害が及ぶことを宣言する。僕をまだ攻撃するつもりなら相応の損害を受けることになると覚悟するがいいよ。
This is some big talk, George. What the fuck? When George proclaimed that, a faint red magic circle rose up around him. You gotta be kidding me. He actually does have some shit behind him. It seemed that George couldn't see it. However, Gap, being a demon, could. So he doesn't even realize he's got some power to him.
どうしてこいつが防御結界を？しかもそれ反撃特化。それがあんたの抑止という意味。
Didn't we see in episode 3 when Beatrice was approaching George that like there was something to him that even allowed him to actually communicate with Beatrice? Like, he's not ordinary, you know, he's got a little something to him. From a demon's perspective, that may have been magic, but in George's eyes, it was determination. It was a determination filled with certainty, which would be merciless to anyone who wished to fight anymore, and which would force them to prepare for a significant counterattack. Determination with certainty becomes magic. I dig it. Well, what do you got, Jessica? I'm not really impressed over here personally. I'm more impressed with George, but let's see what she's got going on. Renove had been accurately blocking Jessica's fist with his shield, but something felt odd. Even though he was certainly catching them on the shield, he felt his arm get jarred and it hurt. It should have prevented all physical damage. However, the damage from her fist was gradually being transmitted to his arm, piling up. Renove tried to act like he was composed, so that this wouldn't be noticed.
私はバテねえぜ。どうしたよおっさん。ちっとは答えてきたかよ。
いくら攻撃しようとも無駄ですよ。私のシールドはあなたには砕けないとどうしてわからないのです？
砕けないからってよ、殴るのをやめはしないぜ。どんな固い心にだって言葉はわずかずつ響き、やがてはひびを入れることだってできるんだ。私は信じてる。この世に無駄な努力なんて存在しないってな。だから生きるんだろ、思いっきり。言葉だっていつか通じるなら拳だって同じってことだぜ。私の辞書には諦めるって文字は書いちゃいねえんだぜ。
Those words were probably aimed at Kanun, who had seemed to reject Jessica's words. But Jessica knew that no matter how stubborn his heart was, those words would eventually soak through. She believed they would surely reach his heart, that the day would come when he would stop calling himself furniture and disparaging himself, and that he would step out into a new life. So Jessica didn't give up. She didn't lose heart.
バカみてえだろ。男には理解できねえだろ。恋する乙女ってのはな、無駄だから諦めるって考えがねえんだぜ。
At that time, Renove certainly saw. He saw the reddish glow of light that encircled Jessica's fists. Oh, so she's got the same thing going on.
これは参りました。エンチャントですか。浸透付与とは厄介。
Inside her unrelenting fists and determination dwelled the power to succeed no matter what. From a demon's perspective, that was magic. Determination with certainty becomes magic.
な、無駄なんてことはねえだろ。通ってんだろ。私の拳。腕をかばってるぜ、おっさん。
もう少し本気を出さざるを得ないようですね。おっしゃる通りのようです。この世に無駄なことなどな。
そうさ。
Yeah, tell that to Battler, by the way.
無駄なんて諦めたら、そこで人生が終わっちまうぜ。通じるんだよ、絶対に。
I'm an idiot, so this is the only way I can live. But even so, I'm sure I'll be able to teach Kanon-kun about a new world someday. So I'm not gonna lose heart in a place like this. I'll definitely defeat you. And save everyone.
くそ、なんとか隙間を。
Kraus was repeating his useless effort to somehow open a hole between the metal bars. Useless. Nothing is useless. There's nothing. The lookout goats had been swallowed up by those black pitfalls and disappeared. Now was their once-in-a-lifetime chance. This was their only chance to break the bars.
よせ、無茶だ。クラウスさん、素手でどうにかなるもんじゃない。道具を探しましょう。無茶をするんじゃない。無駄と諦めたらそれまでと娘に言われてしまった。私の体は無理でも小柄なシャノンかカノンが抜けられれば。
この段階に至っては出ない知恵を絞るより行動あるのみね。力を合わせましょう。私もやるわ。カノン君、男の子でしょ。手を貸して。カノン君？
Wait, what's he doing? What's he got going
旦
on?
那様、下がってください。
Oh, he's gonna blast this shit open.
何をする気だ。
いいよね、姉さん。もう一度だけあがいても。
私ももう一度だけあがくよ。一度だけじゃない、何度でも。
Jessica's voice had reached Kanon. It certainly had permeated into his cold, rock-like heart. And George's voice had reached Shannon. If the love he had shown was embodied by strength, she would have to respond in the same way. Goodbye, bars. An incredible metal sound rang out. In the first flash, several metal bars were severed horizontally, and in the next flash, they were severed horizontally again, causing many metal bars to clatter to the ground like bamboo shoots cut by a sword. Kraus, Kirie, and Nanjo didn't even have a clue what had just happened. Hey, at least they're free.
南條先生、お屋敷や廊下をどっちに？
左奥だ、左奥。
参りましょう、旦那様方。すぐにワルギリア様に気づかれます。
あんたたちは一体何なの？
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it?
僕たちは。
When Kanon hung his head a little and faltered, Shannon slapped his shoulder, smiled, and spoke.
私たちは人間です。ワルギリア様！警戒網に反応、脱獄です。なぜか見張りのヤギがいません。
え？どうしてです？ガープですね。人の召喚物を勝手に。ガブガブガブ。
交戦規定確認。脱走者への射殺許可を申請であります。
おやりなさい。やっちゃいなさい。ガブガブガブガブガブ。
了解であります。
Interesting. That is such a reaction from Virgilia, honestly.
45-410追撃狙撃戦準備。弾手収束誘導弾ワルギリア様逃亡阻止結界を。
そうでしたね。ここから逃がしはしませんよ。ガプガプ言ってたら舌噛みました。
Yeah, calm down there. The underground passage in front of them was once again blocked by metal bars. The door was, of course, locked. However, there was no problem for them now.
カノン、また鉄格子だ。頼む。
はい、旦那様。
しかしすごいわ。一体どういう原理なのかしら。
原理など興味ないね。大事なのは彼に鉄格子が切断できてここから脱出できることだけだ。気にするなカノン、やれ。
お任せを。
Finally, Kanun's time to shine. He sliced the metal bars again with his red curved blade, but there was a harsh, strange noise, and the metal bars only had a slight scratch.
なんとこれは頑丈な。
違う、エンチャントされてるワルギリア様の魔法杖だ。
切断できる？
もちろん。でも時間をかけるよ。
3分間待ってやる。
That's a very specific amount of time. After taking a deep breath and concentrating his mind, Kanun extended a red curved sword again. When he pressed it hard against the metal bars, sparks sprayed, almost as though he was melting through it with a burner.
切断はできそうだが、手こずりそうだな。
旦那様、敵に捕捉されました。下がってください。
追って誰も来てないわよ。
私の後ろに下がってください。狙われてます。
Yep, time to use the shield.
45データ治療。標的は捕捉。地形誤差修正。射撃曲線形成。制御点補正完了。410データリンク。410データ受領。危険区域確認。問題なし。
WO 師団装填48発個別誘導 F&F 収束誘導弾準備完了。
45射撃準備完了。収束誘導弾装填。410にひひひ射撃。
Well, we didn't have Shanun's power in the last go around, so let's see how she fares against this. A golden arrow that sparked gold was fired, leaving a gold tail streaming behind. It drew a curve, went through the door, through the keyhole, down the stairs towards the underground path at full speed.
何か光りましたぞ。
黄金の矢はシールドで防げない。カノン君、迎撃態勢。リンクしよう。
ゲートキーパー了解。姉さんと一緒に戦うのは久しぶりだ。動じらないでよ。
本気でやる。
なら問題ない。
What do they got up their sleeve here? Kanun stopped cutting the bars and stood in front of Shanun. Behind him, Shanun closed her eyes, concentrating her mind deep, deep into the darkness of the underground path. A guided cluster round is a special kind of arrow made up of 48 sub-rounds bound together. It explodes mid-fight and divides into 48 mini arrows. The strength of each individual one is low, but they pierce through all shields and possess a perfect wounding and killing power against personnel. And on top of that, each one of the 48 possesses autonomous guidance towards their individual targets.
光った。分裂した。
収束誘導弾分裂確認。師団46、7、8、48全弾捕捉。迎撃完成。カノンへデータリンク。
カノンデータ受領。姉さんの能力はすごいな。48発全部見える。
迎撃優先順位に注意。姉さんを信じて。
もちろんさ。僕は目を開ける必要さえない。
迎撃開始。
はあ
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what I'm seeing here, but They seem to have a little bit of a similarity to whatever it is they're doing here in terms of linking, quote unquote.
迎撃されました。いや、48発全部。
シャノンとカノンはもともと一組の家具ですからね。揃うと手強いこと。あいたたた、これ口内炎になっちゃうかしら。
落ち着け。再装填。弾種を変更。精密高速狙撃弾。精密狙撃戦準備。
そりゃいいね。追撃不能の超高速弾。ゲートキーパーごときじゃ防御不能だに。精密狙撃戦了解。精密射撃用データ収集開始。
一体今のは何なんだ。
Good question, Nanjo. Good question.
安心して。私にもさっぱりよ。一つわかるのは二人に頼らなきゃ死んでたってことね。
カノン君ありがとう。鉄格子に戻って。多分次のは迎撃できない弾が来る。
そんな攻撃をどう防ぐんだ。
撃たせません。カノン君霊視線防備。
At those words, Kanun closed his eyes tightly and ground his teeth. With Shannon at the center, a pressure and impact that only non-humans could perceive struck. What the fuck is going on? What is this shit? Yeah, guys, I'm straight up lost. Don't worry. It's hard to follow these fights and everything. The mumbo jumbo they just, throw out, I can't follow it.
射撃システムエラー。ダメだ。再起動。あれ
霊波妨害。霊視防護。急げ。何をしてるか。早く耳を塞げ45。
Oh, it's too late, isn't it? An unseen, unheard impact had struck the Chester sisters. 00 and 410 crouched down, covering their ears, but 45 didn't make it in time. As she stood bolt upright, her eyes rolled.
45損傷。
If that's what you want to call it.
コンパイラのエンジンがいっちゃったよ。キャー。私もノイズがひどいに。
45、410、そして WO 損傷。狙撃戦を断念。リンクでもろに来た。再起動しないと。
What kind of fucking cyber attack bullshit is this, man, honestly? Raising their spirit particle sensitivity for precision sniping had backfired. They had taken the full brunt of the spirit particle shockwave that Shannon had released. And not only 45 who had been hit directly, but 00 and 410 who had been linked with her were taken down.
大丈夫ですか？後でまた美味しい紅茶を入れてあげますからね。しっかり。
申し訳ございませんであります。再起動をかけます。数百秒ほどお待ちを。
All of the Chester sisters had fallen over. They would probably get back up eventually, but it looked like it would be hard for them to return to the battle lines for a while.
家具が武具を一時的にとはいえ退けますか。なるほど。
Oh no, not that
面白
look.
がる筋書きは実に大番狂わせが多いこと。
Virgilia toward the air with a large gesture, motioning as though opening a door.
さあさあおいでなさい。お仕事の時間ですよ。脱走者たちを殺して捕らえなさい。死体でいいのですよ。どうせ蘇生できるし。
Well, she's got a point. I guess there's more goats to summon. There's always more goats to summon, of course. A gold-colored door opened in the air and countless giant goats with muscular bodies peeked their faces out.
さあさあ急ぎなさい。脱走者は5人いるから5等賞までの早い者勝ち。素敵なご褒美がありますよ。さあさあ頑張って頑張って。
Virgilia clapped her hands, urging them on. A prize? After facing each other at those words, the goats all rushed to the door at once, trying to get out. Making the exodus packed as the what? the Tozai or the Yamanote rail lines in the morning. Okay, well, now I understand. Now I know what we're talking about. Each wanted to get out first, so none of them could get out. Virgilia held her head in frustration. Yeah, good job. By that time, Kannon had managed to cut enough bars to make a crack that could be slipped through. It had been a bit of work for Kraus, large as he was, and Nanjo with his lethal waist, goddamn. But even so, they all managed to make it through. But after they did, they only had a couple seconds to be relieved. Immediately, another set of metal bars blocked the way in front of them.
厳重ね。よっぽどここの人を逃がしたくなかったんでしょうね。
カノン、すまんがもう一度頼む。辛いだろうが頼む。
There was a sweat on Kanun's forehead. You could tell at a glance that cutting the metal bars, which had been made even more solid by magic, had physically exhausted him.
はい。お任せを、旦那様。
お前にしかできん。どうか頼む。
Only he could do it. Holding tightly onto those words, Kanun concentrated his mind once again and set himself to the task of cutting metal bars again.
後方、敵が来ます。複数。
ええ、今度は私たちにもわかるわ。すごい地響きね。とんでもない化け物が殺到してくるのがわかるわ。
Yeah, here comes the goats.
ご安心を。今抜けた鉄格子を私が魔法杖で封鎖します。ヤギたちごときには破れません。
Shannon held her hand out towards the metal bars they had gone through, but she stopped right away.
どうかしましたか？
ワルギリア様が霊波妨害の中和を開始。破られるとまずい。シエスタ姉妹の再起動後のイニシアチブを奪われます。
可愛いウサギたちをいじめてくれたお返しはたっぷりとさせていただきますよ。この小賢しい霊視で優位に立とうというなら、それを丸ごと剥ぎ取って私が奪ってあげます。
姉さんは霊波妨害に集中して、あのヤギたちにその鉄格子の隙間は狭すぎる。しばらくは食い止めてくれるはず。
何を言っているかさっぱりだが。
I'm right there with you, Kraus, honestly.
だいぶやばいってことだけは理解できたわ。
Chirie picked up a metal bar that Kanun had just cut. Kraus had no weapon, but he rubbed his fists, and the two of them glared into the depths of the underground passage where the shaking was coming from.
この鉄格子で遮るものはおしまいのはずだ。ここから屋敷までどのくらいあるんです？かなり歩く。道は平坦だが30分は歩いた記憶が。
The fuck?
全力疾走ならその半分ってことだわ。
30 minutes? They couldn't tell for sure since they didn't have the three-sided mirror. But there was no guarantee that George and Jessica would still be alright against demon opponents after all this time.
歩く2倍の速度で走れば15分。さらにその2倍で走れば8分を切るわ。
さらにその倍の全力疾走なら5分かからん。問題ない。むちゃくちゃな計算ですが。
Look, they're just pumping each other up. It's whatever.
ですが、カジマの計算式はそういうものです。
申し訳ございません。旦那様方、後を頼みます。
任せたまえ。カノンは1秒でも早く鉄格子を。シャノンはワルギリアとかいう魔女への妨害に専念したまえ。追っては私とキリエさんで防ぐ。
Then the roars of beasts rang out from the darkness and several fiery, glowing, bright red eyes appeared. Goats that were several levels more massive than the guards were rushing with an incredible force. The tremors they created were almost like an earthquake. They brought a frightening intensity and terror, but Kirie actually laughed with relief. Those massive bodies wouldn't be able to go through the crack in the bars. Oh, you'd be surprised. The group of goats crashed into the metal bars with a fierce sound, like that of a train colliding with a dead end. Clumps of dirt fell here and there from the ceiling, and you could tell that the metal bars had bent as if collapsing. Their charging power probably was on par with a train. If the metal bars hadn't been there, they would likely have overwhelmed the 5 of them and crushed them in an instant. When the group of goats pressing up against the metal bars had noticed the 5 people right in front of them, they let out a terrible howl trying to intimidate the 5. Or maybe that was out of pain from their game of push and shove. One calm goat among them figured out what should be done about the metal bars, then grabbed two of them with its massive arms and began bending them as though opening double doors. Kirie sharply jabbed her metal pole at the goat's vitals. The goat let out a roar of anguish. It probably hurt a lot, but that was all. It wasn't enough to bring it down.
クラウスさん
Still holding the metal pole that she stuck out, Kirie relinquished the opposite tip to Kraus. Kraus ran there with all of his might, jumped up and kicked down with all of his weight and kicking power combined. All of that destructive power was focused on a single pole, drilling it in. Oh, there's no way they took one down, though.
大丈夫ですかな。幹部は揉まないように。お薬は後で処方しましょう。お大事に。
No, okay, I guess he was taken down. As the goat who had taken a pile bunker to its vitals writhed with teary eyes, it nodded its head.
私たちのリンクも結構いけるじゃない。シャノンちゃんたちには負けられないわ。
当然じゃないか。
二人がかりでならいけるわ。次、右側のあいつ。
了解だ。いい嫁さんじゃないか。ルドルフめ、少し愚痴が多かったんじゃないか。
へえ、後で聞かせてもらうわ。ルドルフさん、天国で青くなっても手遅れよ。
Oh, back to George. That's, you know, hopefully winning in his fight. But I'm a little bit out of time. Not really, but I'm going to call it there on the recording. We'll save it on good old slot 16 for this one. And this is a long chapter, actually. Yes, we're getting into the long ones, which could mean that we're getting into the end game here on this episode. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But be sure to tune in next time for more of these epic fights or whatever. They actually are fun. I'm getting kind of pumped up. But thank you all for tuning into this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy.